Today on the Wood World podcast, we've got my friend Gary. Gary is an expert in the industry, and Gary works up in British Columbia, Canada. And so today, we'd love to hear from you, Gary, because you and I had several conversations. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and just sharing your thoughts. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, Vadim, thanks for having me. I'm super excited about your podcast. I'm an expert in designing wood facilities, engineering sawmills and pellet plants, and other wood processing facilities. I've worked exclusively in the wood products industry for 14 years now.
That's incredible. That's a substantial experience already, Gary. Look, you and I had some conversations before the podcast, and my real curiosity, what spiked my curiosity is, I don't think there's any one person. I sure am not proclaiming to be like an expert in all things wood, but what I do see in our industry is a lot of experts that know something really deep, and also a lot of us that see on the surface level a lot of issues or a lot of good things. So both sides, good and bad. Gary, could you maybe first let's start with a little introduction. Just give us a little bit of context. What is it that you do? What have you built? Just give me some kind of flavor for how did you get to where you are today in your career? And then just to set the stage for the audience, guys, I'd really like to understand from Gary's perspective, things that you're seeing in the industry, Gary, things that, you know, you are you and I are aligning on a lot of topics. We know that wood is good. We want to tell the world that wood is good.
Wood
And
is great.
so,
Yeah.
you know what? Let's just jump into it. Give us a little bit more on the introduction, Gary.
Yeah, a little bit more on introduction. So I started 14 years ago with Stolberg Engineering, and really started off designing sawmills and pellet plants, nuts and bolts, from small components, and then working my way up through into actually doing plant design and then project management, and now I run the office, the Richmond office for Mid South. Mid South had bought Stolberg in 2019. So that's kind of the short and sweet kind of version of my background.
Love it. Gary, look, because I've also been in this industry for some time, I kind of understand what you just said. But you know what? There's some people here that are tuning in that take the wood world the way I define it. I'm just coining this term wood world, right?
Yeah.
People think it's forestry, or people might think it's sawmilling, or pellet production. But actually, the wood world that I define is super broad. In fact, I mean it's huge. There's millions of people involved that are creating value on, I would say, the wood product supply chain, and then also a lot of companies like yours that are supporting that supply chain. I mean, the basic question is, where in the wood world do you fit in?
Yeah, so we fit in definitely in the support side. So there's people out there doing logging and setting up cuts and putting logs through mills. And what we do is we support that. We support the wood products facilities, something like how a sawmill, laying out a sawmill, designing the sawmill based on the log population, what's going to go through it, and what the end products are. That's our stuff. So we will take care of all the mechanical equipment, anything that's vendor supplied by a larger OEM. Will help support it and integrate it into the actual mill. We'll do the electrical and the structural design. We'll do concrete, those types of things. So that's what I'm all about, and that's the engineering and consulting part of the wood facilities. For things like sawmills or planer mills or pellet plants or whatever it is.
Totally understood. Well, Gary, I guess another reason why we connected more recently is I started posting about, you know what? It's time to tell the truth about our beautiful industry. And I guess my big message is simple: wood is good. And we see this because you and I are in the weeds daily. Not a lot of people see it the way we see it. So help me understand, what do you see in this industry? Why is wood good, and why are you in this industry still? And you just unpack that for me a little bit.
Yeah, let me give you a little background. So, my parents are immigrants. My dad came here in 1972. He worked in the sawmills for 28 years. And then when I got out of university, I worked for Stolberg Engineering. Stolberg, I think, Stolberg Construction started in 1947, and then the engineering was a huge part of that company. And so I think what people have to understand is that uh, the I think the province was most of the cities and the small towns are made from the forest industry. The forest industry is huge. What is good? I like that saying. I think the forest industry still plays a huge part in British Columbia and our region too. There's obviously Vancouver has developed into multiple industries and different sectors, but the backbone, I think, of the province is still that.
Thank you. Um, what do you do on a daily basis? I mean, there's another part of this whole, I guess, movement. What I'm trying to do is encourage young people to see this industry as one that's thriving. It's there's a lot of opportunities. Do you see it that way? And can you kind of share maybe what do you do on a daily basis? What kind of jobs do you guys have at your company? What can young people go and look up on Google? Like, I want to become a such and such. I want to be like Gary.
Yeah, I think my office is it's niche. I'll explain a little bit. I think first to answer the first part of your question, I think the wood industry is definitely something that's going to be here for a long time. It's a great industry to be in. I think the people are great. I think the legacy, the history is great. So those things I think are it's what's going for it. What I do is there's a lot of engineering consulting firms, right? And they might be in residential or they might be in designing skyscraper, whatever it is. What we do here is we do all of the engineering and support for wood facilities. And so what I do on a day-to-day basis, I like I told you, I'm a mechanical engineer by education, and I used to design conveyors and conveying systems, and then later on we did a lot of plant design, or I did a lot of plant design, and then project management is one of the big things that we do here, and that's all to do with the planning stage of capital projects for these wood facilities. So whenever we have somebody doing a big upgrade, or a brand new mill or whatever it is, modernizations, they'll come to us and say, okay, we have the planning stage. This is what we intend to do. We will come up with designs, and most of it's drawings, right? Like the deliverable, the end game there is what you get at the end are issued for construction drawings and designs for whatever the mill output is going to be.
Okay. So if I can help summarize for somebody who's watching and doesn't know how a sawmill gets put together, let's imagine the sawmill, because you brought up sawmill, is a
Mhm.
black box, right? Your input into this black box is what?
The logs,
Logs.
logs, yeah.
And then the output is
Is generally timbers and lumber, and so all the processes in between are generally taken care of by an OEM company
yeah.
that will design, or multiple OEMs that design specific types of machinery. And then but to put all that machinery together and to like, you need all the disciplines, right? You need electrical, you need to support it with structural. There's buildings involved in the whole plant layout, so that's what we take care of. And then just to go back into, let's say, sawmills, for example. So you got logs coming in, they're cut on a primary breakdown. They'll generally go through a secondary process, and then they'll go and be trimmed and sorted and stacked. Go through another process generally, which is a drying process in the kilns, and then they'll go through a final process through a planer mill, where they're planed and they're kind of like shaved down into finished pieces. And so that's, in a nutshell, I think what we're trying to get at is for the layman, that's the process from going from logs to lumber.
I love it. And besides sawmills, what other types of mills can you or have you guys worked on?
Yeah, we've worked on a lot of plywood and veneer. So we've done those ones where they actually take a log and they'll peel it. They peel it into a thin veneer, and then in a plywood plant, they'll glue those and press those veneers together to make ply, and it's multi-ply. So that's one of them. So I cut my teeth on pellet plants, which is another type of plant where it takes different residuals from different sawmills, or wherever the wood product facility is, and or the bush from where the tree was cut up, and then it goes through a process, and the end product is a wood pellet, and then that wood pellet is used for power generation in place of coal.
Gary, something you're touching on, I think, but from somebody looking outside into our industry, would you say that these plants, as you design them, and these, like, for example, the pellet plant, a tree doesn't go to waste? As far as I've seen our industry, there's no like waste.
Zero waste.
Everything gets used. Can you
Mhm.
unpack that just a little bit? I mean, like, yes, you make lumber, and then there's all these things like the shavings or the sawdust or the trims or whatever. What happens to all this? Is it thrown away or landfill, or where does it go?
Yeah, so that's what we call residual material, and that's all used up. Every part of the tree is used somewhere. So if it's the bark, sometimes that goes to a furnace, and it's again used for cogeneration, power generation, or for heat. And then the sawdust, the shavings, the chips, or wherever it is, those things can go to either biomass, or the chips can go to a pulp mill to make paper. So there's zero waste. There's no part of the tree that's actually wasted. All of it's used.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's what I hear. That's what I see when I go to factories and mills and wood products facilities across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we're gonna try to switch topics here for a little bit, like, thank you for the context. That's what you do. But as you do what you do, what are you seeing as far as key issues? I mean, our industry, I feel like, does a lot of good, and that's why my message to the general public is wood is good. I guess, first of all, do you agree with that premise that wood is good? And then unpack that for us. Like, what are the key issues today that are causing some division? Maybe not even inside of our industry, but higher level. Let's put the cards on the table. What are the key issues that our industry, maybe more regionally in BC or in Canada as a whole, or maybe even across North America and the globe? What are some of these key issues? If you can please share with me about the wood
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, so regionally, I think we've seen fiber supply issues and
Mhm.
mill closures in BC. That's probably the biggest problem that we have, and because of that, there's been a flight to safety, and I think we've seen the majors move from BC to the southern United States. I think the big third one is the misinformation and sustainability, and around that, what people think about it and what the attitudes are towards forestry.
Got it. Well, can you share a little bit about what are the issues, point at the issues? And again, I'm not expecting to close the loop here and propose a solution necessarily, but just help me understand, and maybe our audience to understand, like, these are really serious issues. And Gary, like, I don't take these lightly, because I mean, I honestly spent half of my July, driving around in Canada, in BC, the bulk of it. And it's so sad to me to go into rural communities and hear, you know, that my friends are really suffering. And it saddens me. I mean, I live in the US, but, is there anywhere how help me understand these things? Because my goal would be to just go find information. And I'm not saying I'm the expert. I'm saying that I'm going to go out there and try to find and get information, and publish that information as much as I can.
Yeah, I think in BC the big thing is that the AAC, the annual allowable cut, has been reduced, and it's been reduced to less than half.
Wow.
I think the provincial government has a lot to do with it. The stumpage fees is another big problem. I think it's the most expensive log to get into a sawmill anywhere in North America. And then the new thing that we just saw last week is the U.S. tariffs on Canadian softwood. So there's a number of things that are playing into the region as issues, and I think what we've seen is there's been a flight to safety, and we've seen the majors move down to the south. There's a bigger return on investment in the south, and so I could see why there's a lot of companies moving down there. The
Gary,
opportunity cost.
when you say majors, you're talking about companies like we just saw another press release from Canfor. They're shutting down another few sawmills, and it's again sad because those sawmills are in rural areas that basically drive economics of a small town. Is that right?
Yeah, we saw two. There was Canfor Plateau and Canfor Fort St. John, both closed. Stolberg actually designed the Canfor Plateau mill in 2005.
Wow.
So if you're looking at 2005 and it's 2024, we got 19 years out of that mill. And in the South, I think you're looking at 20 and 30-year outlooks because you got, the government's friendlier. You have a partner in the fiber supply, and the cost to get a log into the mill is a lot less. And so, the investment dollars are going to go where the opportunity cost is better, and that's what we're seeing right now. It's a big issue, and I think I'm not sure what the solution is, but I think that something has to be done. There has to be better planning in the government that allows more companies to stay here and to do business here in the wood world.
Yeah. No, listen, I mean, we work with a lot of Canadian companies at Koval, and yeah, it's definitely it saddens me to see that those press releases and things that I hear from the people I work with on a daily basis. Um, but let's come back to that, or let's keep going, Gary. What other
Yeah, let's
you
yeah,
mentioned
let's keep going.
as far as
I think
big
that
issues?
ties. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we can come back to that, but like go back to the big picture. Like, what other key issues do you feel are at play right now in North America?
Well, I think what ties into that last thing is that the First Nations, the Indigenous people,
Okay.
are also they're going to play a huge role, and they have. I think there's going to be a lot of partnerships, and that's part of the reconciliation here, and that new agreements will probably be set up. I'm sure that there's going to be a different type of tenure and logging agreements. I think, which will probably lead to hopefully a lot of smaller sawmills and investments from those communities. And so I think out of something that's really bad, I think we're going to get some good out of it. And we already saw after the just recently Canfor announced that their Mackenzie forest license is going to go, which has been sold to Indigenous bands. So I think there's going to be a lot of change in that area too.
Got it. I guess in the U.S. we probably call them different, but what are First Nations in BC?
They're the indigenous people of Canada,
Yeah.
and so they're the. I don't know the exact term. I think First Nations. They used to be called Indians. I know that's not the right term, but historically, I think they had agreements, and so those agreements now they're being reconciled, and so they're going to have a huge role to play in the forest industry.
How does I don't know if you're familiar with this, but like how is logging different in Canada versus the US? I heard some of this, but like, do you know much about it, or can you point me in the right direction? Who to go
Yeah,
after?
generally, I think in the U.S. It's private ownership. I think they're owned by REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, um, and in BC and in Canada, they're owned by the Crown. So the government decides what the stewardship and the forest tenures and what the investment's going to be and what the stumpage costs are. So there's uh, a single seller versus multiple sellers, and so that's the big difference.
And when you said they reduced it, that's a fact that we can just go look up, right? That's on some.
Absolutely, absolutely.
some
So it's been reduced almost in half, and the Council on Forest Industries has the data on that. It says the in 2023 the harvest fell to 35 million cubic meters, could be as low as 30 million this year. And I think the original, I think 4 or 5 years ago, was 80 million.
So I mean, like high level in one sentence. I mean, it's
Mhm.
a complex issue, but basically, what I'm understanding from that, and the way I interpret it, is basically if you're cutting fiber supply, you're basically choking the folks who need fiber as the input to their black box to make something of value.
Absolutely. And then the second part of that is the fees that you're charging for that.
Mm,
And so the stumpage fees are too high. That's part of the problem. In the United States, it's more free market because you have so many people or so many companies selling the logs. So there's an actual fairness there, right?
Gary, help me understand. So if I again from a big picture perspective, if your raw material going into the black box, call it sawmill,
Mhm.
higher,
Yeah.
then that means that and we know raw materials are a big percentage of economics of a mill.
Mhm.
At the output, that means the output, the products that are made, they're gonna have to be priced higher, right? But then because the output of mills in BC and the mills in US all play in the global commodities market,
Price is
that
going to
makes
be the same.
that makes
Yeah.
that makes it not so advantageous to be the guy who has to pay a lot more for input. I mean, I know
Yeah.
I'm simplifying here, but
Exactly.
help me understand.
No, you got it. And so, because you got to compete on the global market, so you can't, you're not going to be able to sell your two by fours for more money, and they got to be in the same dollar value. So really, what it is the profit gets squeezed for the sawmillers in this area because the input costs are higher.
Hmm, understood. Well, I'll chase that one down. Maybe we can come back to it if you have any ideas of. Do you have any recommendations for folks that maybe I can go talk with, or if ideally, if I could get them on the podcast, who could speak in a very educated way, pro against? I want to hear all perspectives, really, in long format conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people. I mean, if you want to know the story, I'm not probably not the best guy to ask about how these things have happened or what the negotiations were with the government. But I think Don Kane, he's the CEO of Canfor, but he's retiring at the end of the year. I think he's a good guy to ask. Maybe after he retires. Ray Ferris is another guy. He's the CEO of, or was the CEO of West Fraser.
Hmm,
So those two guys would probably be the right guys to ask what the story was and figure out, what they think, what's their solutions for these things.
sure, sure.
And I'm sure they would have some really valuable insights into, how they'd like to see it.
Right.
Um,
Understood. Okay. Well, I'll try to follow that train of thought forward. What other are would you say are key issues right now that we touched on?
um, I I think we touched on the major ones. Was there something that you had in mind that you remember from our previous chat?
Well, it seems to me that it comes up a lot in conversations. Maybe I could share a couple that feel come to mind, like labor. I mean, to run a factory, yes, it's automated the way you guys design them, and the way that I see, sawmills and mills just overall are getting more automated. I mean, that's maybe why I relate to you. Is my background is engineering, and so
Mm-hmm.
my job was to help with sawmill automation, with 3D scanning, etc. But still,
Mm-hmm.
you need people, and I believe what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, is labor still one of those hot topics.
I think getting reliable labor probably is, or getting the skilled labor. But I think right now, I think the bigger issue with the sawmills closing is probably getting enough work for the people that we already have. So that's my concern, right? My concern, the big thing that kind of hurts me is, like I told you when we started, my family, my father was in the sawmill industry for a very long time, and you think about some of the families that are up north, and when a mill closed down, there's 500 people laid off. I think that's the bigger problem, right? So where do those people go, and where do they fit in? what happens to those communities? They're really small communities, so they're super affected. I think that's
Well,
a huge thing.
I mean, I see your perspective, as a guy from Canada, but like in the US, I feel like still I'm hearing that people want skilled labor and such. So maybe there's a gap and an opportunity, but then it's like people are literally living with their families and established in these communities. Like it's not like that easy to like pick up and move to a whole different country, etc. So
That's right. Yeah, yeah, it's very tough, very tough.
Um, other topics like just buzzwords that people like throw around, but I feel like I really want to go chase down. Some of those are like things like uh, climate change or trees are good, which is true. But then like people say don't cut those trees, or when a tree is cut, it's a negative thing. And I don't know, man. I get it that like some places somewhere there could be bad players, but from what I've seen in North America, like there there's a lot of really good people doing a lot of good things with wood, and it's just kind of sad to me that you know it feels that when I go to association meetings and um, talk to people in our industry, like we understand that wood is good, but how do we help get the message out that wood is good and should be consumed by consumers that drive the demand for you know all the different things. What are trees used for, I guess, at the end of the day, Gary? Like, and then help me understand, how do I go chase this down and share the message that we originally agreed to, that wood is good.
Yeah, I think you're the right guy. Like, I think storytelling is really important. I think packaging it properly, for the everyday people is important. I think you're probably the right guy that does that. And I think the big story that needs to be told is like the forest cycle, or if you package it in the carbon cycle. That's huge. That's a huge thing. I don't think a lot of people understand that, and I think they should probably teach it in schools. But I think people really need to understand that when there's the forest cycle starts when the trees grow, right? The trees grow and they're bringing in a ton of carbon. They're carbon dioxide, so they're pulling it all in. Those trees mature. It becomes a forest. There's a canopy. Um, Once that matures, it hits that high spot, and then beyond that, the forest becomes decadent, right? Once it's decadent, it starts to decay, and you get something replenishes. There's always going to be a cycle that replenishes. So it either decays, and there's tons of insects that are formed. There's fires, huge fires that are happening. That's one of the other big issues that I should have brought up earlier. The forest fires that are happening now are huge. There's too much fuel in the forest. So that's another thing, right? We gotta if we want to manage the fires, we got to manage the forest. So one of the things that plays right into that is harvesting those trees once they get to that top peak before they start to decay, or when they start to decay, so that the forest is staying really healthy. So what you do is you can pull out those logs, and when you're making houses or you're making furniture or whatever it is, and you put that wood to use, it's storing that carbon into those products. And before that carbon dioxide goes back into the environment, um, it's actually going to be used somewhere. And that's where the biomass stuff comes in, where I hear a lot of people saying, oh, why would we use this? And I think people have to understand that carbon dioxide, or whatever that carbon was, is going back to the environment anyways, and it's worse if it goes up in a fire. So the best is if you can use it, and capture all that carbon in using different systems and technologies, on the emission side when you're power generating, right? And so I think if that story is told really well, you know, better than the way I told it. But if you told it, and you did it with the right graphics and the right kind of storyline, and explained it, I think you would hit that broader audience, right? Like you'd get to um, all of the moms, right? Like the moms and the dads out there, right, that are teaching their kids. Are they teaching them the right things? Is it, or are they teaching them, hey, we want to, deforestation is bad, which is true. Deforestation is bad. Environmentalism is good, but if they're misinformed and don't have it quite right, that's where I think they don't quite understand that the wood products industry is helping the forest industry. It's all one, right? It helps it together. So that's a great story to tell, and I think that's it. That would be a good one that kind of describes the issues that you're talking about.
Gary, I absolutely agree. I mean, I was recently at the conference and someone mentioned like this. It's a sunrise industry, and I love that. And also what you just mentioned, it's one that unifies. I mean, look, dude, like I mean, it absolutely unifies people. I go across the globe to talk to people about wood. And I guess it kind of makes me like a wood nut at this point. Like people are like, okay, here's this guy who's all bent up on wood. But like truly, man, like it unites people, it aligns people. Like the people who are,
Sure.
pro forests, and there's groups all over that are I'm learning about more and more that are, for whatever reason, anti wood, and I want to go have long form conversations with him, Gary. Like I want those people to approach and let's have a civil, reasonable, long form conversation. Explain your point of view. You're trying to preserve habitats for the critters in the woods. Beautiful. We do too. But like fundamentally, there's kind of a breakdown in that. Is it education? Is it misinformation? What is it that? And I want to go chase it down. I'd love to do
Yeah.
that.
I mean, we can have it all, right? Like we can have the critters in the forest. We can have healthy forest. We can have working forest. We can make sure everything is good. I think a lot of times misinformation is there, and I think sometimes, like you had mentioned, some of the protesters, we don't know how they're fun. Like we don't know what they're after. What are they? If they're against wood, what are they for, right? And so
Mm.
I think their motives, some of the motives have to be questioned. I think there's some really good models. I think there's the plantations in the South, in the southern U.S. The the um, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Well,
Um,
you're talking about the misinformation and plantations of southern yellow pine in the south.
That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah. So the plantations of the southern yellow pine in the south are a good example of managed forest, right? And so they harvest those, and that's the right way to do it. Um, and they also do that in Europe. And so those are some key things that we can look at and say, how have they done it? And then what do we want to do up here or in different areas? How do you want to manage those forests? And see the success in how they've done it, and what the environment looks like there. And so, yeah, I think those would be good examples to point to.
There's a lot of issues that are happening in the wood world as we know it. We touched on some of those. My goal is to continue asking the hard questions and try to really go into those areas and understand for myself. I'm a super curious kind of guy, and understand like what is happening, like with the topics we touched on. And I'm literally going to be traveling to various events and trade shows and expos, talking to people who own sawmills and forest lands, people who sell forest lands in the South and the Pacific Northwest. So I'm literally going in many different, too many different people and places across North America.
Hmm.
I'm a really curious kind of guy, but if you had an opportunity to ask, the guys in the southern yellow pine market, what kind of questions or what kind of things can I ask them or show so that people that are outside of our industry can start really getting a sense of, well, what's actually happening inside? What can I show? What can I ask? Any thoughts or suggestions there, Gary?
Um, I think a good story is, how does it affect, how is the changing market affecting you as a sawmiller? What's different than it was 10 years ago? How is it affecting your workers? Has has the wood industry, has the improvements down there affected the families and the people, and how has that growth come? That's what I would want to know. I think also, Vadim, you were talked about. I saw your video of when you went to Africa, and
Mm.
so something along those lines of how just having um, like a sawmill, or having a group of people come together, or how they came together um, to produce these products, forest products. I think that is a great story to get after. And I'd like to know, kind of, even for support industries like ourselves. Um, Last time I went to SFPA, I talked to somebody who said, "Oh, I just love the forest products industry because I used to sell these sensors or whatever it was," and he said, but now I got this industry, and he's got a client. He doesn't sell anywhere else. He only sells in this market now. And so some of those stories would be really nice to hear about, of how this industry is taking care of itself, right? And how that integrates with new people and with the people that were here. Southern yellow pine is definitely kind of, it's expanded so much. It's everywhere, and so I know that's going to have a huge net positive effect for all of the people in those regions. So those stories would be interesting to hear.
I love it. Thank you, and I'm all about it, man. I don't know if I told you yet, but the Wood World podcast, we aren't sponsored, and I'm literally following my own curiosity. So, we as a business make money in doing projects at Koval, supporting the industry. But when I'm out there and doing things like this is genuinely me trying to scratch that curiosity itch for myself, and that's why I ask you to come on and share kind of your thoughts. I genuinely believe in this industry. I believe there's a lot of good it does, and I believe wood is good, which is the message here. And want to chase after these stories and try to understand deeper, all the intricacies of not just sawmilling, but what I call the wood world is quite a bit broader than that.
I think, man, you're doing the right thing. I want to see your stories through the lens. I like it. I think you're the right guy to do it, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much for taking some time. I'm glad that we were able to put together this podcast. I didn't give you much notice. We just talked last week, and I felt your passion and excitement about everything that's happening in our industry. And I'm like, man, this is what I'm doing already. So come on and kind of share some thoughts. Thanks for highlighting some key issues. And actually, now I'm inspired to go chase after those, and try to get some more attention to ask the right people the right questions, and get some attention on some of these hot issues. Get
I
to the
love
bottom.
your energy, man. Thank you. Thank you.
Gary.